Braka, braka, braka. Hope all is well with everybody. Take a look at the screen. You're going to know that we're going to get right into it. We're not playing no games. YouTube, you're going to have to catch up, but there are projections that people have within themselves that we call today. You were self-talking. You was talking to self and thought you expressed yourself to the person you had a problem with when the whole time you was having a head conversation with self. And you got perturbed by yourself, through self, that when the actual time came for the person that came around you, you took it out on them and they did nothing to you because you didn't tell them what bothered you. It's okay, or whatever. Braka, angel rolling. Now, Facebook, YouTube, you know it's your soul brother in righteousness, and other people portray their demons upon you and make it like it's you, and it's not. So here's other teachers that's going to tell y'all and show to y'all if I'm a liar or not. Braka, Beethoven keys, which I know y'all know. But for the opposers, we also got to teach them too in love. Ishe, Shalom, enjoy.
Question: has anyone ever blamed you for how they misinterpreted a situation? Maybe they yelled, cried, and blamed you for something they were clearly projecting outward. And by doing so, question: has anyone ever blamed you for how they misinterpreted a situation? Maybe they yelled, cried, and blamed you for something they were clearly projecting outward. And by doing so, left you in a state of being puzzled and highly confused. There's a chance that their shadow was speaking without them even knowing it. This is shadow projection, a phenomenon that happens with others and yourself. Get ready to get a big picture and detailed understanding of how the unconscious directs what we see in the world. Today I want to talk about a very powerful phenomenon called shadow projection. And in this video, I want to break down what shadow projection is and how it works related to human psychology. And it's going to really give a good background about certain traits that you may be experiencing that are in your shadow that you may be projecting out into everyday life, everyday people, etc. And this video can give you insight about projections that others may have onto you. So it's going to go a very long way. I first want to start by defining what the shadow is, what projection is, and then we're going to put it together and then define what shadow projection is. So the shadow are traits or behaviors, both positive or negative, that we push out of our conscious awareness and into our shadow. These traits are usually traits that we don't want to face because we deem them either bad or unacceptable, or society has deemed them unacceptable. You can almost think of them as traits that are in darkness. Case in point, why Carl Jung coined it the shadow. But again, they're not always negative traits. There can be some positive traits in there, and I'll give examples really soon. But the great traits that you do identify can be integrated into your personality to make you become more whole. And also, the negative traits, you can find kernels of goodness in the negative traits that can make your life better or can make you better at a certain task. Now, for this given thing I just mentioned, I can't help myself, so I'll give an example right now. One thing I've integrated in myself, and I've channeled the correct way, is the trait of anger. And what I mean by that is I don't get angry in everyday life. That's not what I mean. I mean, in a narrow field, I channel anger to make me better at it. For example, when I play basketball, I noticed that if I get angry internally, right, this anger of I want to win, I need to win, then I end up playing better on the basketball court. This doesn't mean that I yell at people on my team, or yell at my opponents. It means that I've channeled anger in a very controlled way to make me better at basketball. So you can see how quote-unquote negative traits can be turned around and used in a very constructive, helpful way. Quote, psychiatrist Carl Jung defines the shadow as the parts of our personality we reject out of fear, ignorance, shame, or lack of love. We unconsciously reject them because we find them unacceptable. We don't like them. They are unacceptable to our self-image, our identity, and our ideal ego self. And again, this is especially the case that they're unacceptable if you view them in a very myopic black and white type of deal. You hear about in religion, you hear about the 7 deadly sins. And in a sense, yeah, if you approach life utilizing the 7 deadly sins all day, every day, it's not going to lead to the best life. But there are kernels of goodness in these sins that you can utilize in a very controlled way, in a controlled, conscious way. So both our positive and negative traits can be integrated in healthy ways. For example, if in your shadow you have this need for love, right? Like a need for love is a big thing in the human condition. You can integrate the need for love in a very healthy way. You give love and you receive love, and you understand the love language of the person that you're with, or a given friend or family member that you hang out with. You can integrate this in a very healthy way. Now, are there people that integrate the need for love in unhealthy ways? Yeah, there's codependence, there's neediness, and these are unhealthy ways to integrate, the need for love in a given situation. It can be very repellent. So it's not necessarily always about, is the trait good or bad? It's about how is this being integrated into our personality? Is it in a healthy way? It's also context-based. What context are we using this in? So always remember that. Quote, the shadow is a defense for many, especially for children. It is a defense against being shamed. It is a defense against being reprimanded. And so we push all these socially risky parts of ourselves into the shadow and pretend they are not there. But obviously, being an adult means you have to be honest and you have to be polite. You have to be helpful, and you also need to know when to set a boundary and say no. Not to mention that you need to know when it is time to ask for help yourself. So the problem, or better said, the challenge with this defense from our childhood is to come to terms with it before it becomes an unclear obstacle in our journey of becoming an adult. That's very well said. As children, we create these defenses in order to appease, parents, in order to be socialized the right way into society. But as we get older, what happens as adults? We still have our needs. And if we haven't addressed these childhood shadow aspects, some of these traumas even, then, at least it can lead to a lot of dysfunction as we get older. Carl Jung says everyone carries a shadow, and it's absolutely the case. That person that's a goody two-shoes, I guarantee you they have.
Now, that's what we teach here. Everything is the Holy Spirit. If it's meant and mean as any way possible to help you, no man on the face of this earth with any great gifts can do that. Now, for those that are on Facebook, you're only going to get a preview. This is where it ends for you. You have to finish this on YouTube. It's posted on the page of B.C. As for YouTube, we're going to continue.
Aspects about themselves they don't accept, and they don't deem it as a good thing. They may be a people pleaser because their sense of individuality has been pushed down. And when they see someone that's very individualistic and bold and all of that, they say that they cast negative judgment on that person. However, that's a secret trait that they have within themselves, or maybe a secret trait they really want to have, but it's been beaten out of them throughout the years. So this stuff gets really interesting when you start to understand how these shadow traits really work. And the thing about what
recordings just got better. Hey, it's Dana from StreamYard. I'm so excited
Always
to announce that local recordings are now available.
The thing about what Carl Jung says about the shadow is that it allows us to have great insights about ourselves, to develop good understanding, better understanding of how we work. Because if we don't understand and integrate these different traits of ourselves, we become a lot more segmented in our personality. And also these traits can come out in very devious ways because of repression and you pushing it down throughout the years. For instance, someone that doesn't accept the fact that, they can experience sadness, like they just want to be positivity all the time. Well, if they do have instances of sadness, they're going to try to repress it, and then it could come out in a different way, right? So they're truly sad, but they may lash out in frustration and anger about a given situation because they can't admit to themselves that they're feeling sad. It's not wrong to feel sad. It's a human emotion. Well, first you have to accept that and then process it. And then from there, you have to think about what meaning are you assigning to a situation that's contributing to sadness? What can you learn about being sad right now? And then when you sit in that and then you process that, you go through it, you understand that sadness is a natural human emotion, not that you need to be sad all day, every day. But if you're sad, then you're sad. And then you take measures to get out of the sadness. But notice that you're still accepting of the sadness, but you're not sitting there for too long, essentially. So that's very important. Now, let's talk about projection. Projection is basically our glasses, right, of the world. We don't view the world objectively. The world is filtered through our perceptions and our beliefs and so many things. We naturally project our beliefs. We naturally project our lens onto the world. Two people can look at one situation but come out with two different interpretations of the given situation. And sometimes with projection, we may not even know that we're projecting in our day-to-day life because it's harder to take responsibility for that. Like, it's so seamless to project onto the world, to project your interpretations, to project what someone is potentially saying about something. Harder to take responsibility for that, but you have to be consciously aware that every day, like, we have our projections, we have our meanings we assign to things. Case in point, like, let's say you own a pet. How many times do you like project human behaviors onto your pets? Like, you think your pets will like a certain thing you like, or like, it's funny. Sometimes when my girlfriend and I are like watching our favorite shows, we'll project that her cat is also enjoying the show just like us. Like, because the cat will be watching the television, and like we're like, our human brains are like, oh, she's watching with us and all of that. Sure, it's in a joking manner, but I can also point to other examples where we kind of project human tendencies onto the cat. So that's how we go about the world, right? Human to human, human to non-humans. We project our human perception onto things. So you assume that others have the same projections as you, but that's not always the case, right? That's where misunderstandings and disagreements come from. Two people look at a situation and there's a communication piece missing, and they're projecting their own interpretations onto those given situations. Quote, projection itself is really just a part of the way perception operates. We respond not to the external environment, but to our own internal representations of the environment. Our thoughts, feelings, images in the psyche are our lenses and are the encoded film through which we experience. That's very well put. So let's put it together, the shadow and projection. Let's define it together with shadow projection. Shadow projection is projecting onto others your own undesired, unexplored traits or behaviors, both positive or negative. And I'm going to give examples of both positive and negative scenarios. But it's essentially when we're unconscious of these traits and then we project it out, like, oh, this person's being this right now, this person's being that right now. But it's a trait that you are projecting out that's within yourself. So later in this video, we're going to explore how to identify your shadow traits, but it is important to understand that we have to identify what are the traits we haven't accepted within ourselves that this person is quote unquote giving off. Now let's get into some examples of shadow projection. An example is a boy's mother always leaves the house and never comes back when she says she's going to. She says, hey, I'm going here, I'm going out, I'll be back at 9 p.m. Let's say she says that. And then most of the time, she always comes back later. Like, she comes back at 1 a.m. or 2 a.m. And the boy throughout the years develops abandonment issue, fear of abandonment. And he doesn't feel much love when his mother is away, feeling a lot of lack of love. And then a void of quality time starts to develop. So his love language becomes quality time. He didn't necessarily get that much from his mother. So as he gets older, he gets into a relationship and he constantly feels like his girlfriend's going to abandon him. Right? He constantly feels this uneasiness, this anxiety around her leaving potentially. He hasn't yet identified that this is coming from his childhood. They live together, and then his girlfriend says that she's going to go somewhere, she's going to leave, like she's going to visit some place and then come back. And most of the time, she's right about the time she gets back, right? Like she says she'll be back at 6, and she gets back at 6. But there's a couple instances where she comes back at 7, an hour later than she anticipated. Because of what's in his shadow, when she leaves and comes back late, he feels like she doesn't love him. He feels like she doesn't love him because that's something his mother did.
Now, in this case, it's self-awareness, but not with the spirit. We lack the understanding. This is the artificial or alternate and intelligent reality through the air of a shadow of ourself in a dimension of a low frequency telling us she cheating or whatever, making you upset, not in the fruit of the spirit, steady taking the energy towards the Most High or positivity to actually get the reality answer of what you do not understand. So this is the battles that we face. We call head conversation. Man, this dude over here had head conversation, bro. He never told me that how I talk bothered. He was talking to himself and built himself up and got mad and then snapped on me and I bust him in the mouth. That's how situations like that happen. Because you not being real. You phony. Indirectly.
Did when he was younger. And he doesn't realize this, so he doesn't necessarily communicate this, but he subconsciously is passive aggressive towards her in order to kind of get her back for, not loving him because
I should say we phony.
She comes back. And the passive aggressiveness builds up, and it eventually starts to sabotage the relationship. He's shadow projecting his abandonment issues around lateness to her. And she doesn't know that because he hasn't communicated it. And he doesn't know that because he didn't do the inner work to identify that this is what's making him uneasy. That quality time is important to him. And when she's late, his girlfriend is late, he feels as though she doesn't love him. That's his interpretation. She could be completely surprised by this, right? Like maybe she gets some gifts. She tells him she loves him all the time. But there's a disconnect in the communication. So he focuses on those instances where she's late. So you can see how he's projecting these things onto her, and it's really not even the case of what's going on. This is how deep this thing can get. So a solution would be him going back and really dissecting where this fear of abandonment has come from, and then communicating that to her. So now, they're both on.
You use an example of a relationship, but this could be friends, at the job, with the boss. This is just different scenarios of a projected image of an existence of that's not really a reality. It's a virtual reality through carbonated covering that we can taste, touch of the senses of by attached to the still holographical image we call DNA is a light hologram, because the sound of the Most High is why you get that spiral and you call the double helix, because those are two sounds, your sound or you're going to listen to your purpose of the Most High. Well, where's the devil? Oh, that's you or whoever ain't doing their destiny. If Yeshua is Yeshua and he say, hey, man, I can't even do nothing but what was written of me or spoken by the great mother you call the Holy Spirit, because it was she that told him to do something at the wedding of Cana that wasn't written, never prophesied, not even stardust. But that should tell you when you got the breath power of the spirit, you ain't at what? Slave or held by the laws of nature. You got the liberty to step on them and pull down power like the people with showbread. And you can't do that. No, you can't do that. But where I'm from is a higher level where I super exceed this punk man priesthood y'all faking around here. And I'm the real king. Everybody shut up. And Yeshua stamped approval in Mark chapter 2, verse 25 to the end. And then told us we are Lord and Lordesses over the Shabbat. Shabbat was not made to be over man, but let liberty and rewards for him trusting the Most High. Woo, eternity rewards so super exceed limited editions that don't live forever. Just saying.
on the same page so that she understands that his form of feeling love is her being very present and on time. And then as he works on this, it becomes less of a threat towards whether or not he feels love. Here's a second example. Let's say a guy is a very peaceful person, right? He's done a lot of self-development in his life and he's developed a very peaceful attitude towards life. Let's say the guy is very peaceful. His name is Anthony. And let's say his friend's name is Brian. And his friend Brian experiences a lot more neurotic emotions like sadness and anger. He's more prone to those emotions. He's higher in neuroticism compared to Anthony. Now, Anthony does have some glimpses of experiencing some neurotic emotion, natural part of the human condition. Things are going to come up. His emotional intelligence is developed to identify it. However, he still is very uneasy about the idea of experiencing negative emotions because, he's been working on himself. He's arrived, hasn't he? How can he be experiencing these negative emotions? Because he's not accepting of the fact that he can experience negative emotions from time to time. These negative emotions become a shadow aspect, right? Anger and sadness becomes a shadow aspect of himself. So he represses it and he pushes it down. And then what happens when he experiences glimpses of sadness or anger? Well, it's going to be cognitive dissonance. So what he's going to do, he's going to rationalize that it's the external world that's making me like this, or I'm not someone that gets sad ever. So this situation is the reason why I'm like this. It's not coming from me. Now, this is where it starts to happen, right? And then he can start externalizing that it's other people's fault why he's not at peace at the moment. But the truth is, he's a human and he'll experience these. Even if it's rare, like let's say you developed yourself. It's like, yeah, it's very rare for you to maybe get sad or angry. But it doesn't mean that these emotions aren't to be experienced. And it's not to say that these emotions don't have their value. Because, for example, if you integrate that, hey, sadness can happen and you're accepting of it, well, if there are instances where you need to cry, you'll allow yourself to cry. You'll allow yourself to remove the emotional baggage that you're holding on to. But if you repress it, that sadness can come out in very unconscious and very negative ways. So that's another example. Third example. Now let's talk about projecting positive qualities onto people. Let's take power differential, right? So you're learning from someone or you're taking information from an expert or a person that has a lot of information on something. And then you project all this knowledge and goodwill onto the person. It's very likely that this person is giving you good knowledge and very goodwill. Person's contributing to your growth. So now it's very easy to project very positive qualities and to even project that this person knows every single detail about reality, every little thing, every little speck, because they're very good in this certain field or maybe multiple fields. So yeah, now you project all these positive qualities that may or may not be there. And these could be qualities that you want to project because these are qualities that you want to develop. So maybe you want.
Once everything's perfectly organized, I'll start working on my thesis.
Grammarly will ensure you feel confident nailing your.
So maybe you want to be very smart in a given field yourself, or maybe you want to be very articulate yourself. And these are positive traits that you feel like you're integrating. So you project them all onto this person. And they may have some of them, but they may not have all of them. And they may not be super knowledgeable in all areas. Just because someone understands wood cutting very well doesn't mean they know how to build a house, for example. Or just because someone understands sociology very well doesn't mean they'll be fully adapted to or fully understand psychological topics. So that's what can happen, right? We can project onto mentors and teachers, et cetera, all of these traits that maybe we want to work on or that we just haven't developed just yet. Or you could be someone that's being projected onto. Like, let's say you're an expert in something. The person learning from you may project all this know-how onto you. And then that'll be up to you to tell them, hey, actually, that field that you mentioned right there, that's actually not my expertise. And then that way they know, essentially. But it's very seamless. It can be done very quickly if we're not aware of it. Also, if you are someone that's projecting onto the person that's learning from you, you have to be mindful of that. And I have a quote about that. Quote, in such a relationship, your projection or perceptual lens through which you see the other person may be believed by that person as well, without recognizing that it may not be the truth about who the person is in that moment. So that's very important, right? You can have certain projections, shadow projections of your own that you give to a student that's learning from you or someone that's learning from you. And because they view you in such a good light and, you know, you're like your teacher and all of that, they're going to accept that without really even thinking about it because, I mean, you know, you must know everything essentially. So even when you're teaching, you have to be mindful of your shadow. Like when I'm on calls with people, I have to be aware of my shadow related to how I'm interpreting their given situations and making sure I'm not projecting me into their given situation. So with shadow projection, it's all about bringing these traits into conscious awareness. This is what leads to us feeling more whole, feeling more versatile. This is why I feel like I can speak to almost anybody, because there's all these traits I've integrated throughout the years to a point where I can speak to someone that doesn't agree with my worldview, and I can speak to someone that does agree with my worldview. I can speak to someone that's a lot older than me with a different background and still have a great dialogue with them. I can better meet people where they're at while still being authentic to who I am, because I've integrated a lot of traits into my psyche. Because at the end of the day, these people are mirrors to who we are. If there's someone that you really disagree with and you don't see eye to eye, well, what traits are they exhibiting that you may have in your shadow? And how can you even bring these traits out in a very positive and constructive way? The big thing here with shadow projection and working on it is making sure we judge ourselves less. I talked about this with someone on a call recently. We can better discover our traits when we judge ourselves less. Like we stop saying, I'm bad for experiencing this, or I'm bad for integrating this thing, or this, that, and the third. Because, again, a kernel of goodness, of helpfulness in that quote-unquote negative trait. So we have to practice less judgment. That's so important. Carl Jung talks about the anima and the animus, and the anima being the feminine energy within a male, and then the animus being the masculine energy within a female. And when we judge ourselves less, we can better integrate these different energies. This is also touched upon in the law of gender and hermeticism, where there's a list of masculine attributes and a list of feminine attributes. And we can integrate all these traits, and it becomes this healthy dance of masculine and feminine energy that, you know, we all need in order to feel that life versatility, to feel like we're expansive, to feel more whole and complete. Like, take a guy that's a lot in his masculine energy, but he doesn't have empathy, or he doesn't hold space for himself to experience emotions. Well, he's going to repress a lot of emotions without that feminine energy. Now, take a woman that hasn't integrated boldness and confidence into her psyche. Well, she's going to let people kind of maybe walk all over her. She's not going to set boundaries. She may be more empathetic, but she's missing the other qualities that are key for her development. So masculine and feminine energy and anima and animus, these also contribute to integrating our shadow aspect. Here's a quote by Carl Jung. Projection is one of the commonest psychic phenomena. Everything that is unconscious in ourselves we discover in our neighbor, and we treat him accordingly. That's a very good one. Here's a quote by Carl Jung around very overly nice people. I really like this one. When one tries desperately to be good and wonderful and perfect, then all the more the shadow develops a definite will to be black and evil and destructive. People cannot see that. They are always striving to be marvelous. And then they discover that terrible, destructive things happen, which they cannot understand. And they either deny that such facts have anything to do with them, or if they admit them, they take them for natural afflictions, or they try to minimize them and to shift the responsibility elsewhere. Kind of like an example I talked about earlier in this video, where the peaceful guy, Anthony, projects that he's feeling sadness and anger because of a situation and it's not coming from him. But continuing on, the fact that one tries beyond one's capacity to be perfect, the shadow descends into hell and becomes the devil. And this is what leads into scapegoating. How often do people blame you for things that they haven't necessarily processed within themselves? Or you may scapegoat someone else, place blame on somebody else because of shadow aspects you haven't worked on within yourself. Like, see what you made me do, or it's this person's fault why I'm like this. And you may even scapegoat your parents. And maybe they've contributed to things being in your shadow, but it's still your responsibility to bring those out. So scapegoating is a common thing that happens. So let's get into how to identify and integrate shadow traits. So first, notice what triggers you or what you feel strongly about. What creates a strong emotion related to what someone says or how someone behaves? That could be within yourself that you haven't fully accepted. Because if you fully accept that, now you can be more empathetic with that person. Because when you have more understanding about something, it's harder to be mad at the given person. So for example, if someone's very greedy, at face value, you look at that, you're like, man, this person's so greedy. Like, all this person cares about is money. Or all this person cares about is this, that, and the third. But you can look at yourself and say, well, where in my life am I greedy? Maybe it's not in the area of money, but maybe it's in the area of my time or what I like to focus on. Maybe I'm greedy with the type of people I like to spend my time with. So you can see where other areas in your life you actually are a bit more greedy, but you haven't accepted that. You haven't even noticed it maybe. But now that you notice it and you're like, wow, actually there are times in your life where being a more greedy makes more sense. It doesn't have to be the standpoint of money. It can be in the standpoint of other things in your life. So that's kind of an example. So you can integrate that in a healthy way. Anger. Earlier I talked about how I integrated anger into playing basketball specifically, whereas other areas of my life, it has no purpose. But if I do get angry because of a situation, I can accept it, analyze it, and then I can take measures to get back into higher states of consciousness. So when you integrate these traits, you want to reframe them based on the context where it can help you. You want to think about the context of it being, helpful. Like for instance, let's say someone was younger and they're very bold as a child and they spoke out very loudly during church service and then their parents yelled at them when they got home. That pretty much upsets them. And ever since then, the child's very quiet and he's not as bold anymore because he associates it with being yelled at. But as he gets older into his career, he has to be more bold, right? If he wants to start a business, he has to be more bold. He has to be more out there. He has to be confident in his product or service and his marketing message and everything. That way he stands out in the loud marketplace. Take negative traits or behaviors that you feel strongly about or you don't want to necessarily experience, and then don't judge yourself as you explore them and as you integrate them based on context. So you want to identify what triggers you and what part of you is being reflected back to you. Maybe you have to go back to your past and really identify where it's coming from. And then it's very important that you sit with that feeling without judgment and you hold space for yourself. Again, judging yourself less is so crucial here. And then you want to acknowledge that and then give yourself permission to feel however you're feeling. And then think about how can I integrate this in a very healthy way. I always approach shadow work through questions, asking myself questions and questions. That way I can get to the root cause of things. And as I'm asking myself questions, I don't judge myself. This allows me to get more authentic and truthful answers. And of course, you want to make sure that you forgive yourself. It's very easy to guilt yourself and say, oh, I've repressed this for so long and now I'm exploring it and I've wasted so much time and this has really affected me this whole time. Make sure you're forgiving yourself and really hold space for yourself because you're the one that could best be there for you. You always want to remember that. So forgiveness is very key for any mistakes or things you didn't know. And at the end of the day, maybe this is your first time you've been learning about this stuff, right? Maybe this is the first time you even come across my content. So you want to make sure you're not beating yourself up too much for just starting to do this work or you've procrastinated on. Maybe you heard about shadow integration, but it wasn't that clear for you this whole time and you maybe procrastinated on it. Well, hold space for yourself. That's very key. Another thing you can do is notice positive qualities in people that you know and love. So maybe you have a friend that's very funny. He's very relaxed and very funny. And these are traits that you really like about him. Well, these could be traits that you actually want to integrate within yourself. That's part of the reasons why you're friends with him, because you really admire how relaxed and funny he is. So in a sense, you can break down, how do I bring that out of myself? Relaxedness and funniness within myself. Well, one way you can go about it is you can look at archetypes. Archetypes are these figures in human history and in the human condition that appear over and over. There's the king, the magician, the lover, the outlaw, all sorts of archetypes. One of the archetypes that Carl Jung coined is the trickster or the fool. Now, when you integrate these archetypes, it doesn't mean that you become your entire personality becomes a trickster or a fool. No, you integrate certain qualities about that archetype and bring it out of you and you bring it into your present psyche. The fool may be funny because he's relaxed, or because he's bold, and he's outspoken, maybe, right? So you can integrate boldness, and you can integrate outspokenness into your psyche. You can practice that. And in the beginning, it may be uncomfortable. It has to do with how you've pushed that down, or you've pushed it away. As in, maybe it was something that was very uncomfortable, or you were told to not be too loud, like in my church example, or you were told that, hey, or don't be a clown or whatever. But the truth is, humor can really make a social situation more light. It can build up your charisma. It can help you make friends. So it's a good thing to integrate. So if you're using archetypes for shadow work, you can look at the positive and negative qualities of each archetype, and then you can see, okay, what about this archetype is within me? One important thing for shadow projection is to remember that you're becoming more whole. Because with identity, what happens? We create this identity and we say, I am this and I am not that. I am this and I am not that. And when we say we are not that, that's what becomes in our shadow. So I'm a spiritual person. I never care about money. Or I'm a spiritual person. I never get sad or angry. How does a person become more whole? Well, they see the benefits, they see the value of the things that they quote unquote reject. They see how to integrate it in a healthy way. Can I care about money without being super greedy about it? Absolutely. Well,
so you are given the power as Yeshua had prophesied. It's up to you what you spill your energy, spill your gift, spill the God power on, but he will hold you accountable. All right, Facebook, I got something very special for you that we ain't gonna do on YouTube. Everybody gets no partiality. So as we said, certain things we can talk about here that we can't there we can't here. It's why we tell you, get this page, get that page. See y'all soon. Ishe, Shalom.